St. Patrick was called by spirit up Crog Eigel and tempted by the devil, or so they say. St. Patrick climbed the mountain of the eagle, now called Crog Patrick, and he stayed there 40 days and 40 nights, fasting and praying for the people of Ireland. The story goes that when he was out of food, the devil appeared, but not in the form, and not in one form rather, but in the form of a horde of crows. The crows surrounded him and began to move in on him, jumping and pecking and crowing. And he began to yell and scream and make his way to a bell at the top of the hill. And he rang that bell wildly so that everyone in the countryside could hear the bell. And then he yelled at the crows, "Away with you! Worship the Lord your God." And Patrick, with a renewed faith, walked back down the mountain and continued to serve the people of Ireland for the rest of his life. That is a story filled with legend, right? Happy St. Patrick's Day. You know, in Unity, we can look to other faith traditions. We can respect our Muslim neighbors, our Buddhist neighbors. We can pray with the Muslims of New Zealand today. And we can also turn to ancient traditions like the Irish to look for wisdom. So today we're talking about the spiritual wisdom of the Irish. And of course, in the United States, many Americans have seen this Feast of St. Patrick as an opportunity to celebrate their Irish heritage and, of course, to party. I'm actually intrigued by the spiritual wisdom of the Irish. What could we learn from ancient saints a world away? And how are their traditions relevant to us? So this morning we'll explore these key ideas. The religious culture of Ireland, a very brief summary, some unique spiritual customs of the Irish, and how the practice of magic, yes, I said magic, informs our own spiritual quest. So I invite you this morning to affirm with me, the world is enchanted. The world is enchanted. I set aside time for my spiritual journey, and I open to the magic in everyday life. Together, I set aside time for my spiritual journey, and I open to the magic of everyday life. St. Bridget of Kildare gave away her father's jeweled sword. It happened this way. Bridget worked in the dairy, and her father got very angry when he found out that she was regularly giving away milk and bread and butter and grain to the poor people who came and asked for food. He was so angry that he threatened to sell Bridget to the King of Leicester. And off they went. He threw her in the chariot. They took off to the king. And when they arrived, he put down his jeweled sword and went inside. Just then, someone came and asked her for food. Bridget took the decorated sword and handed it to the man so that he could buy money for his family. Buy food for his family, rather. Now, the king was skeptical of this supposed arrangement, and never having met the girl, walked outside with her father. And the father noticed right away the sword was missing. As she answered, he flew into another rage. Now the king was shocked, and he wanted to hear her answer. She simply looked right at the king and said, "I would sell all your royal riches to feed Christ's brothers and sisters." And Bridget continued this practice. You know, the king was so amazed that he refused any arrangement. Bridget's father was so disgusted that they drove off and went home. She fled and joined a convent. So today, I want to share some more about Bridget and about Patrick. So what was the religious culture of Ireland? I turned it off, I turned it on. By the 5th century, various invaders had actually moved into Rome. And the peace of Rome and its European territories experienced chaos. Violence reigned. Millions lost their lives. Dynasties crumbled as buildings fell. Meanwhile, in Ireland, the Christian successors of Patrick moved the culture from chaos to peace. The Christians of Ireland did not conquer, but simply adapted. Before Christianity, the early Celts of Ireland were semi-nomadic warriors known for violence and cruelty. And on that isolated island, there were Druid priests who connected the people to the cycles of nature. The religion of the Irish was both nature-based and Christian. Both of those religions, nature-based and Christian, embraced the magical. So what do I mean by magical? By magic, I mean techniques that use what we seemingly think of as supernatural agencies of the forces of nature. Magic encompasses all 4 elements of nature: water, air, earth, and fire. And we might use the word magic for those enchanted and sacred incidents of life. You know, the Irish spout enchanting stories of Patrick's courage as well as his earthiness and warmth. Do you know that he regularly rescued souls from purgatory every Thursday and Saturday? And that he gave the salmon the gift of jumping? There's a story about that too. In fact, Patrick was not Irish. He was probably born in Scotland, but he adopted Ireland and became an Irishman at heart while sharing the sacred. The Irish also tell larger-than-life stories of Bridget's supernatural power for multiplying food, as well as her generosity and her vision. Bridget fled the restrictions of patriarchy, and she found spiritual power. In fact, she founded and led a unique monastery in County Kildare. It was for women and men together in the 5th century. The Irish still embrace the magic of nature. A friend a few years ago brought me this Irish wishing stone from the mountains of Galway. So as I hold this piece of marble, I can wish for health, for happiness, and for love. And somehow I tap into the magical, right? I'm connected to the earth. This morning we look at unique perspectives from Ireland about pilgrimage and about everyday life. So pilgrimages are common to magical places in Ireland. The story of Patrick has to do with a pilgrimage to the mountain. The 2,500-foot peak in County Mayo has been a pilgrimage site for 5,000 years. Patrick wasn't the first. At the top, early people marked the beginning of the harvest season, and the early Christians built a tiny church. Today, thousands still make the climb for contemplation and transformation. And the thing about a pilgrimage is being invested in the journey, not knowing what the outcome will be, but taking the journey. So why are some places sacred? The Irish actually speak of finding God in thin places. And they're not talking about a diet. These are spots where the divine seems more readily available, where the seen and the unseen are connected. One of those places is an ancient tomb at Newgrange, built so that every December 31st, or every December 21st, light enters a small opening and illuminates the center room for exactly 17 minutes. These people were deeply connected to nature. The ancient Irish also gathered at groves, at stones and lakes. Celtic Christians set churches on those special places. And Bridget directed the building of the Church of the Oak, a sacred site of the Druids. So how do the Irish think of the sacred in everyday life? Well, they recognize that people can connect to the magic of nature in their common activities. Celtic Christianity is, in a sense, panentheistic, meaning it stresses the nearness of the divine, but also understanding its greatness. Let's think about the idea of equality. God is present in everyone, right? That's about the nearness of God. Irish Christianity began with monastic communities, and most of those were male-oriented, but sometimes women were seen and became valuable and valued leaders. Their centers of learning actually praised diversity. 5th century understanding of diversity. Written in one of the monastery rule books was this idea: different is the condition of everyone, and different is the nature of each place. They stress the importance of love above order and giving suggestions rather than restrictions. So what is magical about creativity? Think about the Celtic crosses of Ireland. Some of them are 10 to 15 feet tall, and with them the Irish took ancient nature symbols and incorporated them with an active faith. In his book, How the Irish Saved Civilization, Thomas Cahill explained how the monks of Ireland read and copied much of Western culture, most of Western literature. You know, European invaders had destroyed the works of classic poetry, history, and philosophy, yet in isolated Ireland, monks were copying and creating astonishingly decorated volumes of the Bible, of Homer, of Plato, and Aristotle. They saved their own ancient tales and songs, but the Irish also recognized this wisdom from other traditions, and they used their creativity as expressions of faith, much like a pilgrimage. You know, as a child, I journeyed to my own magical place. When I felt like life got challenging, I ran. I ran to a stream on the farm where I grew up, far away from everyone. I glided through the green pastures. In the summer, it was dotted with black-eyed Susans, and I would duck under the dark green trees to find the stream. There was a big rock that jutted out into the water, and I could sit for hours on that rock. That was a sacred place for me. It was a place where I could yell, I could scream, I could cry out loud, I could talk, and I could listen to the forces of nature around me. The wind, the water, the bugs buzzing by. And in that place, I found peace. I was safe. And I found renewal. And now, over 50 years later, I realize that I can find that place anytime, right? It's in here. And you have a place like that as well. Creativity serves a similar purpose. So what about our everyday lives? What do we envision? The power of imagination shows itself in meaningful and life-giving ways. We see the results all around us. The songs, the stories, the beauty and dance. If we think of a world that works for all, what would it look like to you? The power of compassion calls us to look at the world and at our own lives. How do we create a more equal world? So think about where you feel at peace and refreshed. Sometimes we just need to journey to those magical or those thin places where we feel connected to God. And I know that many of you find that peace in nature, whether it's at the beach or on the mountain. In some ways, the Big Island reminds me of the stories of Ireland. Pilgrimage has its advantages, helping to focus our mind and to challenge our faith. And pilgrimage is about intention. We remember too that our everyday lives are a spiritual journey. When the world's challenges seem daunting, we remind ourselves that as spiritual beings, we're part of the solution. So we dream, we paint, we dance, we climb. We can make our spirituality active in the world. We can open to the magic in everyday life and in sacred pilgrimage. The author and theologian Thomas More declares, to live in an enchanted world, we have to assume the role of magician in our everyday lives. Have a few objects of power within reach. Live by the simple principles of magic. Use poetic language and imagery in our practical affairs, and cultivate an abiding attitude that is at home with mystery and the interiority of life. So we can use magic every day. In this season of Lent, we might choose to fast and pray. We may not choose to spend 40 days on a mountain, but we might choose to let go of chosen foods, activities, or our own negative thoughts. We can embrace the enchanted. We can share beautiful words and gestures with each other. We can offer each other rituals and ceremonies to honor the changes of life. And we can always ground ourselves in the green of nature, in simple practices, and in wild imagination. So affirm with me again. The world around me is enchanted. The world around me is enchanted. I set aside time for my spiritual journey. I open to the magic in everyday life. I set aside time for my spiritual journey. I open to the magic in everyday life. Let's try that last one again. I open to the magic in everyday life. I'll close with an Irish blessing. Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. Deep peace of the Son of Peace to you. Amen.